Hello, I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network, where we connect into a matrix of newsmakers to get to the heart of an issue. And watch out, they've got to answer in 25 seconds or less, or else. Let's take a look at that issue right now.
Anger at the ballot box. It's unseated 11 European leaders since the financial crisis began. It's in part because mainstream parties on the right and left have lost so much ground to populist extremes. In France, the far right was the spoiler for Nicolas Sarkozy, driving him further to the right in the second round of his failed re-election bid. Greece has had trouble creating a new government because of polarization in a struggle over austerity measures imposed by the EU, with its membership in the eurozone at stake. Serbia elected a nationalist eurosceptic president who refuses to recognize an independent Kosovo. Irish voters, however, did approve the EU's belt-tightening fiscal treaty by 60%, a relief to supporters who feared the worst. How can mainstream parties counter the populist tendencies that seduce so many voters today? Or is Europe headed for more divisive politics at a time when consensus is desperately needed?
Now, wired into this edition of The Network is, from Athens, Aristides Hatzis, professor of legal theory at the University of Athens. From Paris, Philippe Moreau-Defarges, political scientist at the French Institute of International Relations, or IFRI. And here from the European Parliament in Brussels, Marco Incerti, research fellow and head of communications at the Center for European Policy Studies, or CEPS. Let's start with a question for all of you, starting with Aristides. How much of a threat do populist parties pose in Europe because of this voter anger? Are we headed for a divided, ungovernable Europe? And what could that mean for the euro and the EU itself? Aristides.
Actually, Chris, this is going to be a very dangerous path. I'm really afraid that this is the beginning of a slippery slope to authoritarianism, to protectionism, and certainly to more economic inefficiency.
Okay. Philippe, what is your opinion of that? Are we heading down a slippery slope?
Yes, we have a real threat. Why? Because the major issue in the European Union today is young people unemployment. If the European Union is unable to settle that issue, to find a way out, it's clear that many young people will vote for populist party. It's why it's a real threat and a real problem.
Okay, Marco, it sounds pretty hopeless to you, doesn't it? Or does it?
It does. I mean, it makes it very difficult to form governments at the national level at a time when governance and leadership are badly needed. But also, this undermines the mutual confidence between member states and the citizens of those member states, which is one of the pillars on which European integration rests.
Okay, and this comes at a really crucial moment when many say that we need more European integration, but so many voters are opting for these eurosceptic parties. How to persuade voters of what needs to be done? Aristides.
People in Europe are in a state of shock for the reasons you mentioned, but also they are in a state, especially in Greece, a state of denial. There are two solutions for me. The first one is the institutional one. We should have institutional structures that ensure democracy and also prosperity. But also we should emphasize and we should give whatever we can to education, to better education.
Okay. Philippe, how concerned are you that populist parties will gain in other member states? Does this mean the EU is highly unlikely to get a new governing treaty, which it might need if it wants to tighten up on integrating its governing aspect?
Yes, you're right. It's very difficult. It needs that probably today we need a new Churchill, somebody able to convince populations that we need this duty. What we can say, if the European Union is destroyed, there is no future for Europe.
Okay. Marco, how concerned are you that populist parties will gain in other countries within Europe, and how much is that threatening this process of trying to find a solution for the financial crisis?
I'm very concerned. It's not just, it doesn't have to do only with the financial crisis. You talk about immigration in Greece or France, and that is a burning issue. I think also it's unfortunately a chicken and egg problem. That is, one of the solutions would be to deliver more at the European level, but to do that you need to take those bold institutional steps that the leaders have been unable to provide so far.
Okay, could this be a democracy deficit, especially from Brussels, that I think a lot of people are beating up on Brussels, especially these populist parties, saying we're being dictated what to do. How do you fix that democracy gap, Aristides?
You know what? One of the most important achievements of our civilization is this Madisonian legacy of the two principles, the democratic principle and the liberal principle. We should emphasize these two principles in the European institutional structure.
Okay.
And they could give more voice to the people through the democratic processes.
Okay. Philippe, then you think it's time for a popularly elected EU president?
No, I am not sure of that. I would like to have a popular elected. It's clear that basically the job now, the work must be done at the national level. It means that the national government must be brave enough to explain that we are in a new world and we need a strong European Federation. But it's clear that these people are very ambivalent, especially in France, because on the one side they want a strong Europe, but on the side they don't want to transfer power to the European Union.
National politicians, and that means more of the same, right, Marco? Or do you see some other way? What about the European Parliament? Some people say that they don't have enough power, and that many of their elections are decided by protest votes. How do you try to give more power to the European Parliament?
Well, I think the European Parliament has been getting more and more powers at every successive round of treaty reform. It has under the Lisbon Treaty,
yes, that's true.
Yes, not just that, but also the last 20 years. Indeed, it would need, especially if we're talking about establishing a European economic governance system, the European Parliament would have to have more of a say about that and more control over it.
Aristides, there's a lot of frustration in Greece about being told what to do. What do you think the answer is?
People in Europe, they think that vote for the European Parliament is a vote with no consequences. It's something like a free vote. So we should do whatever we can to persuade the European people that a vote for the European Parliament has consequences, because now, after the Lisbon Treaty, the European Parliament has more power than it had before.
Philippe, you seem to be opposed to that idea of giving more power to the European Parliament, or what do you think?
No, I think the European Parliament should get more power, but the problem is today that the European Parliament has not the key power that any national parliament has. It's taxing power. You know, we have increased a lot the powers of the
Okay, so does it need that kind of power? Is that the kind of power it needs?
Yes, you know, we need popular representation begin by taxation, and taxation is not settled at the European level, it is settled at the national level, between the national government. It's why, you know, this parliament is not a true parliament. It has a lot of power, but it lacks the decisive power, the taxing power.
Okay, let's go to Marco, and this is the last question for all of you. Where do you see the EU and the Eurozone in 10 years? Do you see it smaller or larger? Do you see it more powerful or more divided? Will it be a trading bloc or what?
I think the big question is whether the EU will be or not. I think, this has been abused as a sentence, but I think we are indeed in one of those make or break moments. So the big question is whether and what kind of answers the leaders will be able to give to the huge problems that are currently on the table. One of the solutions will probably be this two-speed Europe idea that has been coming back to the fore. Certainly there may be stronger integration between certain of the member states who are more willing to progress on the road.
Aristides, do you see Greece in the EU, in the Euro, in 10 years?
I'm very optimistic generally, and I think that Greece will stay in the European Union. So it's absolutely certain for me that we'll do our best to stay in this European Union. Will certainly be more homogeneous and more powerful.
Philippe, you got the last word. What do you think? Where's Europe going to be in 10 years?
I don't see, if the European Union survives, it won't be a two-speed Europe. We need a broad Europe, a large Europe, because, you know, geography is a key factor. We cannot forget geography. In fact, if we're two-speed Europe, we will live with the countries which are outside this strong Europe. And it's clear one of the main challenges we don't mention will be the relation between the north and the south of the Mediterranean. We must establish a strong partnership between both.
Okay, Philippe, thanks very much. That's all the time we've got for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Aristides Hatzis, Philippe Moreau-Defarges, and Marco Incerti. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.